Before I go into a description of the forum, there are a few thank yous I'd like to make. First of all, I'd like to thank the planning team. These folks have worked for 18 months on this project, and I'd like them all to stand. The planning team, please stand if you are on the planning team. Where are you? Okay. Thank you. It's been an amazing journey, and we hope that you will enjoy the work that we have done for you today. And of course, I'd like to thank our funders, the New England Grassroots Environment Fund and the Franklin County Community Development Corporation, and our co-sponsors, Community Action, the Franklin County Food Council, Franklin Regional Council of Governments, Franklin Regional Transit Authority, the Interfaith Council of Franklin County, and LifePath Incorporated. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out from your very busy schedules. And I know how many other things are happening in Franklin County alone today. So I truly appreciate your being here. And that to really deal with a lot of questions that we've been hammering out and working on for a long time here. And I would like you to know that there are 19 towns represented in this group of people, which, considering we're 26 towns in Franklin County, is not too bad at all. So we've got some opportunity here. And we're expecting some folks who have traveled from as far away as Connecticut. So this is a really important day. We have a diversity of opinions and ideas here, and we want you to express those and bring up to the discussions that we have. Prior to the election, everybody seems to be starting to say prior to the election, I was going to start this piece with a detailed description of how Greening Greenfield came to the decision to call this forum Innovation for Rural Living, Finding Solutions to Our Food and Transit Challenges. The election has changed my focus a bit. Both before November 8th and in the period starting with the primaries, this has identified a whole lot of divisions within our society, and that I think we have to recognize and figure out how to deal with. And while the calls of healing have begun, it's going to take a whole lot more than talk to bring us all together, and we're looking for some of that to start here. We're fortunate that we live in a state that has recognized climate change and sustainability as important priorities, but we will not have leadership in this area from Washington, so it's going to be up to us to make sure that these issues are responded to and that we do the work that we need to do. So how do we come to calling this event Innovations for Rural Living? We came to this topic because we recognize that as a region, we're not going to be sustainable until we work together to ensure that everyone has affordable, nutritious food and affordable transportation that takes us anywhere we need to go. And that means working together as communities and as a county to ensure that food and transportation are available to everyone who lives here regardless of income, race, age, gender, sexual identity, level of physical ability, or ethnicity. And that is one tall order for a county that is spread out as much as we are. But I have been consistently encouraged by the ability of people in this region to solve problems by working together. Sometimes solutions come from sheer persistence. Sometimes it's cleverness and looking at the same old problem in a new way. And sometimes it comes from just being unwilling to give up until a solution is found. So we're looking for innovative approaches to well-known concerns. Because cities have such large populations, those looking for new ways to do things often concentrate on the needs that are expressed there. Rural areas are often an afterthought. And we believe that our smaller population and our circumstances can lead to some approaches to concerns that may be appropriate for our region and may be applicable to others as well. So this forum will present some fresh ideas that we hope will engender additional new approaches to our concerns regarding food access and public transportation. We do not expect every idea to be accepted without examination or modification. We want to know why it will work or it won't work, What's good about it? What's not good about it? What will work in my community? What won't? We do, however, hope that they will present some new context for approaching these challenges and engender some new actions to meet our needs for our communities. Putting new ideas on the table is the beginning of the process, not the end. So this is not a talking shop. We are not here to just talk. We hope this forum will lead to initiatives, pilot projects, or other efforts that, well, I guess we'll have to worry about the peacock later, or other efforts that live long beyond today and long beyond 2016. The peacock has been to every forum we've ever run. We can't have a forum without the peacock. We believe that working together to find solutions that meet our wide variety of needs and interests, we can create a stronger and sustainable region that will respond to challenges that come before us. So we're looking for ideas, we're looking for enthusiasm, and we're looking for energy. And I know it's early in the morning, but we're ready to rock and roll. So now on to our keynote speakers. Leanne Brown will be our first speaker. She's a Canadian-born food studies scholar and an avid home cook, and wrote Good and Cheap as the capstone for her master's in food studies from New York University. And we have copies of Good and Cheap up at the table, and we're selling them at a little discount, so it's a good time if you're interested to buy one. After it went viral online as a PDF that today has been downloaded over 1 million times, she published a print edition that won the 2015 IACP Judges' Choice Award. Leanne was also named one of the 2015 Forbes 30 Under 30 and received a Most Innovative Woman in Food and Drink Award from Food and Wine and Fortune magazines. She and her husband live in Brooklyn. Leanne.
Thank you so much. Hello, I'm Leanne, and I am here really as the author of Good and Cheap, this cookbook, which is here today. And it started out, it has a pretty different story than most other cookbooks, I think. It started out as my thesis project for my master's in food studies at NYU. And so when I decided to make Good and Cheap, what I was thinking about was I wanted to make a cookbook that was very much for everyone, but in particular for people who are living on a food stamps or SNAP budget. So that's where the line "eat well on $4 a day" comes from. I did not pull that sort of out of the air. I'm often asked, so why $4? What's this all about? And I go, well, that's the average that some 44 million, actually at the time when I began this work, there were 46 million Americans who were living on food stamps. And I was coming from Canada, and so I always like to compare it to the entire population of Canada. There's 35 million people in all of Canada. And so to me, this seemed like a pretty big deal. So this was something that really struck me, that there are 44 million people. It changes all the time. I think it might even be 42 million, but almost don't even get stuck on that number either. There's 42 million people who are currently signed up for SNAP benefits. They're able to use an EBT card somewhere. But there are millions more who maybe are not signed up for various reasons, either because they can't, because they're not willing to, or in some cases because they don't quite qualify, but they come extremely close. So that includes many millions of senior citizens who are living on very little, and often students as well, and a lot of people who are just so close but don't quite make it. So this is just a huge, huge number of people who are living in this kind of situation. And I thought, here I am, a student, and this may be my only opportunity to do something just because I think it should exist. I wanted to make this. This is my sort of one great skill is I can cook. And I think anyone who's ever worked in a kitchen, who's ever worked in a restaurant knows that it's not the cost of food that makes food incredible. It's all the effort that we put into it. It's kitchen skill. And not budget that can make food so fantastic. And that's something that I knew that I would be able to, I wanted to share with people in the most accessible way possible. So I decided to make this cookbook and make it freely available online. It's still freely available. As Susan mentioned, it has actually been downloaded over 1 million times now, which is incredible. So let me just start kind of at the beginning. When I first developed this idea, people looked at me. I actually said, okay, I want to make a food stamps cookbook. And everyone kind of looked at me like, oh, that's a nice idea, Leanne. But yes, you're all laughing, exactly. And I think it was because everyone was thinking about it in these terms. Bad food, right? I hear a lot of people say tuna casserole and, sort of boxed mac and cheese, these kinds of things. Carbohydrates. Yeah, a lot of sort of carbohydrates, empty carbohydrates. And that's totally understandable, but that really wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I realized that this was kind of a communications problem that I needed to address. And that's why we ended up with this name, Good and Cheap, rather than the SNAP cookbook, all these other sorts of names that I had initially going, is because it needed to sort of counter that argument of what you imagine, the tuna casseroles, the cheap carbohydrates, maybe sort of government pamphlets, photocopied stuff. I wanted this book to be as attractive as any other that you would see that's in the cookbook section. So the one that I grew up with is the one with the best title, in my opinion. Not Just a Load of Old Lentils. Yeah. So it's a wonderful book. These are great books that have fantastic recipes in them, but they're not exactly going to inspire sort of a sense of delight in a lot of people, especially sort of younger people my age who are really, really used to seeing food very visually. So it was really important to me that I create a cookbook that was extremely attractive, and I wanted everyone to pick it up and go, I can't wait to go home and make this. Not, oh, this is something I ought to make, this will save me money. Not all those sort of moral reasons why we do things, but really from your heart, from your deepest center of yourself, that you want to eat something and you want to make that effort. So I just want to go through a few of the recipes with you guys. Can you even see this? So this is banana pancakes. And the reason I like to talk about this one is because you'll notice there's a big pat of butter on the top. And one of the things that I do a little bit differently than a lot of the other things that I was researching and looking at when I was doing this work is actually suggest that we use real butter in most of the recipes as much as possible. And the reason for that, in general, is so typically lower income folks are suggested to buy the cheapest oils or margarines and things like that, and it's very practical. Obviously, we can understand why that's a suggestion. However, cheap oils don't have much taste. They can keep things from sticking to the pan, but they don't really do a heck of a lot else. Whereas butter, not only can you bake with it and you can cook with it even at very high temperatures, it has so much more flavor. It adds so much value. It gives you those crispy brown edges, in a way that nothing else can. And so it holds a great deal more value, and you can use it across all of these different applications. So it's actually really deeply practical as well as delicious. And when you have something that's ultimately going to be delicious, it will encourage you to cook more of the time and feel more powerful, more capable, and you'll make it more of a part of your life. The other thing I think of with this recipe is people often say, why don't you just get a box of pancake mix? When you have a box of pancake mix, all you can ever have is pancakes. When you have flour, you have baking soda, you have butter, you have a few of these other things. You can also make bread, you can make biscuits, you can make scones, you can make muffins, you can make cakes, you can make all kinds of things. So you're actually building a much more sort of efficient system for yourself. So this is a crustless quiche, and I think of this as the sort of end of the week. We often start the week with quite a lot of, maybe you were really excited this week, you got a bunch of fruits and vegetables, maybe you got your CSA. I know a lot of you probably are involved in local CSAs. And by the end of the week, you sort of have a few vegetables floating around. There's maybe like half a tomato and some wilted spinach and some weird leftovers sort of in the corner that you maybe don't even want to think about. This is a great recipe to use that. And there's a bunch of other recipes that are very flexible and sort of meant for these sorts of applications that bring these wilted vegetables back to life. And so all you have to do is you toss all that stuff in your pie dish. We have some caramelized onions on the bottom that sort of make up the crust portion of the quiche. And then you beat up some eggs and a little bit of dairy, you pour it over the top and you bake it, and it really brings those things back to life. And so you have another meal, and it's a beautiful meal. This is something that you would really savor in any kind of restaurant, and it's something that you can make out of stuff that you might otherwise throw out. So, and all the recipes are meant to be that level of flexible. almost all of them, this one I just called the vegetable quiche. Here we're showing it with broccoli, but it really could be absolutely anything. Most of the recipes are meant to be a sort of foundation for you to be able to walk into a grocery store and go, that's what's on sale, or that's what's in season, that's what's most available, that's what looks best, that's what I can afford, that's what I was given, and for you to be empowered to be able to make something out of that. This next one is peanut butter and jelly granola bars. This is one of the most popular recipes in the book, and I kind of developed it thinking about food pantries and food banks, and as well as our own cupboards, which almost always have oats, peanut butter, and jelly. But we've all had a million peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and we've all had oatmeal a million times. We know about that. How can we kind of take these ingredients and make them into something a little bit different and a little bit more functional in our lives? And so what these do is, so you take oats, pour them into a bowl, and then you maybe look in your cupboard for some other random bits that you have. I always like to take the sort of dusty bottom of the bag of cereal, the stuff that you don't really want to mix with the milk, and throw that in there, add some texture. Maybe you have some nuts, maybe you have some dried fruit, whatever. Throw it all in there. Take some peanut butter, or any kind of nut butter, of course, and some jam or jelly. Mix it together with some water, heat it up. It makes a kind of glue. You pour that over the oats, mix it all up together, press it into a pan, bake it for a little while, cut it up, and you have granola bars. Really incredibly simple, and then you can have that on the go throughout the week. And this is something, it's so popular because a lot of people make it with their kids, because it's something they can do themselves. They can try a new kind of jam or jelly, and it's just kind of stress-free because it's so inexpensive to make that you don't have to worry. I think often one thing, when you're working with very little money, you don't have that much flexibility to make mistakes. And so if it's a big risk to try a new recipe, and that's something I'm really aware of. I think it's something to be really mindful of, is that we need to make risks feel less risky. And so something like this, you can you can try something a little bit new, and it will still be okay. It's still going to work out. And so this is a place where a lot of people teach their kids about new flavors. Kids can really get into the kitchen. It's wonderful. I'm delighted by that. Sort of similar concept with this next item, popcorn. Kind of a goofy recipe to be in a cookbook, really, like who really needs a recipe for popcorn? But this came out of when I was doing research. I was working at a WIC center in Bushwick, Brooklyn. If anyone isn't familiar, the WIC program, it's for it's the Women with Infant Children program. It's for parents, pregnant women with kids up to the age of 5. And so I was taking families often on these grocery store tours, and they were kind enough to sort of talk to me about what was difficult for them in shopping, what they were looking for more of, and we exchanged ideas about recipes and all kinds of things. And one of the things I really learned was, snacking is sort of something everyone wants to be able to do, and something that we kind of need in our really busy lives, especially when you have young children. And popcorn was really a great place to go there, because, man, a bag of popcorn that you can buy is something like $4, sometimes even $5 if you're in Brooklyn. It's a really fancy kind of popcorn. But if you buy a pound of kernels, you can get like a garbage bag full of popcorn out of that, and it's an incredibly good deal. So you're getting like $1, and you're getting so much popcorn, and it's fantastic. You can make it in huge quantities and then just have it as a snack all the time. And this is another really fabulous place to play with flavors. So you can, when I was a kid, we always had popcorn nights, and we would mess around and flavor it all differently, because popcorn is just a sponge like anything else. And so this is something that, again, is really, really fun to do with children or for adults who are kind of looking to try something a little bit different in a risk-free kind of way. So this is something that has been oddly, again, very well received. A lot of people said, I just never really thought about making popcorn sort of such a regular part of our lives. And it's also the other thing to keep in mind, if you're not putting too much butter and oil on it, it's actually really quite healthy. It's a whole grain. It's really not so bad for you. So now we'll get into the story of what happened after I graduated. So after I graduated, I went through this period of trying to get the book out there and really not being too sure how. I thought I would work with some nonprofits, but that was taking too long, and I'm horribly impatient. So I decided I would just put it on my website and make it freely available. But I did a terrible job of letting people know about this, partially because I didn't really know what I was doing, and also because I was being a wimp, to be perfectly honest. I was nervous that people didn't really want it, and that I had been wrong, and I was really unsure of myself. And one day I came home from my part-time job, and I opened up my computer, and I had suddenly hundreds and hundreds of messages in my inbox, and they were all from my website. And this struck me as particularly odd because truly up until this point, I think like maybe 10 people had been to my website, and I think most of them were just my dad going there over and over again to tell me about, oh, Leanne, you have a typo here, and I was like, oh, God. He means very well. But what had happened was that someone on Reddit had shared it, which, if anyone isn't familiar, Reddit is a huge website, millions and millions of users. And someone had shared it on here and said, hey, this is this great resource, why don't we all go check it out? And so hundreds of people had come, 50,000 people downloaded it that first night and actually crashed my website, which was kind of embarrassing. So the first emails were, oh, thank you so much, this is great. And then by the end it was like, what's wrong with you? And why is everything broken? But it was incredibly, sort of shocking as it all was, it was so encouraging. People were saying not only, this is wonderful for me right now. I remember one of the first people that wrote to me was this young man named Christian, and he said, I'm a student, and I am going off to school, and I had to cut down on my hours at work, and I am having to go on food stamps for the first time in my life. And I was so afraid that I was just going to be eating ramen, because that's what everyone kind of tells you. And this has just given me so much, this has really reduced my anxiety, and I'm excited. And so there were folks like Christian, and then there were a lot of people who were talking about experiences that they'd had previously in their lives as children, as at different periods of their lives when they had gone through hunger, and how difficult this was to talk about, and how it was great to sort of have this opportunity, and how they wanted to see this out there. And it was just so encouraging. So that's what gave me the courage to launch a Kickstarter to fund a print run of the book, because that was really the ultimate goal. Was it's very easy to give things away for free online. It's as simple as putting up a website. But we knew that there were a lot of people who were not going to be reached unless there was a physical book that you could put in your hand. It's just such a better way to reach people. So we wanted to do this, but in order to do this, we needed money. And so having been galvanized by this community saying, well, we want to help you with this, decided to launch this out of our little apartment. At the time, my husband helped me enormously with this. We figured, and the idea was that we wanted it to still be free for those who couldn't afford it. And so we decided to steal the sort of Tom's Shoes model of the buy one, give one. And so we asked for $10,000, and we figured we could fund a print run of about 2,000 books for that and break even. We'd give away 1,000, probably locally to some nonprofit. We've had some awesome party. We give the other 1,000 away to our backers. But we reached that goal in the first 36 hours of the campaign, and it was a month-long campaign. And so by the end, we had over $144,000, which allowed us to print 40,000 books, which was incredible, and I realized amazing, but it was also really scary, you guys, because we lived in a tiny apartment. We had no idea what we were doing. I had so many nightmares about the truck pulling up and, me sort of being there by myself on our third floor walk up, being like, want to help me with all these boxes? And them just being like, nope, and turning back around. Luckily, we managed to get some space, and it all did work out in the end, but it was an extraordinary experience, and just really taught me that when you have an idea, you have to put it out there, you have to ask for help, and people will come. And people really, really, really care about this issue. Everyone cares about hunger. The truth is, I think everyone knows in their hearts that everyone deserves to eat well, and everyone wants to eat well and feed their family well, and that's just fundamentally true, and people want to help you with that when you give them something to do. The problem why I think so much of us spend so much time worrying about things and not doing is because we don't know where our energy is best spent. And when you can give people something tangible to do, they will step up and help you every time. So I just want to point, so this is, again, you can't really see, but this is one of the lovely recipes from the book. It's Filipino chicken adobo. It's this beautiful dish. And one of the cool things that I got to do during the Kickstarter was one of the reward levels was if you gave a certain amount to the project, I would work with you to develop a recipe and put it in the book. And so this is one of them. This is from a man named Tony Pangilinan, and he sort of told me his story, which was really touching. I just want to share it with you guys today. So this is Tony's recipe, almost I messed with it a little bit, but it really is his recipe, a family recipe. And he and his family came from the Philippines to the US in the 1970s, and they came with nothing but 4 suitcases, he said, and some dreams. I think they had like $100 between them, very, very typical immigrant story. And when they arrived, his parents were unable to find really good paying jobs at the beginning. Again, they were very well educated, they had good jobs in the Philippines, but they couldn't get them here, as is so often the case. So they found themselves using food stamps, and it really helped them out for a number of years. Eventually, his parents were able to get out of that, and it was great. But then, when Tony came of age, when he was 18, he had to move out on his own. He found himself back in a similar situation. He just couldn't find a job that paid him enough to pay his rent and all these things and to have enough food. And so he found himself back on food stamps, and it helped him out, again, for a number of years. Eventually, again, he was able to find something that worked really well for him. And now he has a family of his own. He's doing extremely well for himself, and he likes to, involve himself in as many sort of community projects as possible. And he told me, a few years ago, I went back to the Philippines to visit extended family, and we stayed with, I think it was his aunt and cousins, and their house had recently been really, not destroyed, but the basement level had been, the first level had pretty much been destroyed by floods. And despite this, they hosted them, they made adobo and all kinds of things for them. And Tony is really moved and really struck by just how incredibly lucky he was. And so, of course, he and his family paid to have their house fixed, and he's a patron to his nieces and nephews. He sends them off to college and all this stuff, and he's so incredibly proud to be able to do this, and he can do this because of the support of the system. And I just wanted to share that with you because that is really the most typical SNAP story that you'll hear. It sounds extraordinary, but it's actually really typical. That's how the program is designed to work. It gives so much more, or people who are a part of it give so much more than they really take from it. And I think that's just so important to sort of be aware of, especially in this time when we don't know what's going to happen with these programs over the next few years. So, after the Kickstarter, I ended up hearing from a publisher, and initially I was really surprised. I heard from several publishers, actually, and I initially was like, you guys know that I'm about giving away free cookbooks, right? And it turned out that this one, Workman Publishing, who is the publisher that I work with now, they said, yes, we want to help you make this initiative available sort of ongoing, forevermore, and we'll help you create a second edition. And so we made a second edition of the book. We added a bunch of new information, new recipes, and all that came out last summer. And again, for every copy that we sell, we donate one to a different, well, we didn't donate them one at a time. We usually donate them in boxes so that they're a lot more useful to people. And so I just wanted to share with you, this is my baby. This is the thing I'm most proud of. This is a map that shows all the different organizations across the United States, a few in Canada, but not very many, that we have worked with. I think we're almost at 1,400 different organizations across the country. So if you want to go, this is on my website, leannebrown.com/impact. It's just that at the bottom. And if you want to check this out, you can click on any of those little flags, and they'll show you the organizations in that location that we're working with. And so you can sort of see a little bit of what's going on. Thank you, that's very kind. And we're doing this every day, so that's, what is it? We've donated over 70,000. We also sell them at cost to nonprofits and often to organizations that maybe aren't technically nonprofits but are working with the populations that we want to reach. So for example, oddly enough, we work with a number of health insurance companies who are really interested in this, which struck me. And I was like, we're not giving you free books, guys, but we'll give them to you at discounts so that you can give them away. So I believe that's almost 160,000 that we've managed to get out through that network, which is really, really exciting. And what's my favorite thing about this subject is I had this idea, and I have my version of the book and what I think it means, what it means to me and the way that I imagine people using it. But it's been so much more powerful than that in the hands of all these different organizations like this community. You guys know your community. you have your organizations that are set up and you have things that work the way that they do, and you know how best to reach the people in your own community. And so I think these books are so much more powerful in the hands of all these folks than it ever could be just from me trying to give them out on my own. Really, really powerful network. So I just want to share a few of the places that we, just really, really quickly. I thought you guys would be interested in this. This is the Farmers Market Association in New York. Has this program. It's basically a CSA, a inexpensive CSA. It's $10 a week, and if you're on SNAP, it's sort of $10 on your EBT card a week, and you get wonderful fresh vegetables every week. And one thing that is always difficult with something like that, especially if you're sort of new to a CSA, is knowing what to do with the vegetables that you get. You know, rutabagas, what are these? Why am I getting them all the time? Maybe you might be familiar with collards, but you're less familiar with Swiss chard or with kale. You know, there's all these sorts of things that can be intimidating at first. And so what they did was we gave them some books, and they gave out copies of Good and Cheap along with the first boxes, so that you'd have just a nice group of recipes to start yourself off with. This is a really exciting initiative at the Free Library in Philadelphia. So this is their main public library downtown. They have a culinary literacy center there, which is amazing. It's basically this huge cooking, it's not huge, but they have a cooking facility, and they've started to think about cooking as a part of their larger educational process. And this photo in particular is actually from their ESL class, and they've started to do the first few, libraries all over the country have ESL programs. Of course, it's one of the most important things that they do, and it's one of the most important ways that they can welcome, especially new immigrants, sort of into the library system, into being a part of the community. And so almost every library has ESL courses, and it can be difficult at first to kind of get people talking to each other, make people feel comfortable, and so they've started making the first few classes be in the Culinary Literacy Center and be hands-on. And so they'll be looking at English recipes and trying to create these recipes together. And so they're ending their first few days making a meal together. And Good and Cheap, because it's meant for absolutely everyone, it has a really wide variety of cuisines available. And so these were often recipes that are a lot more familiar to people who are coming from all over the world. Learning how to navigate new grocery stores where there might be really unfamiliar ingredients, or the things that you're used to being cheap are actually really expensive, and the things that you're used to being expensive are actually really cheap. It's also confusing and difficult. So this has just been a really great icebreaker, and I encourage you to learn more about the Culinary Literacy Center if you're interested in Philadelphia, because it's very cool. And then this is something pretty new. It's an app. So one of the big challenges, if you're on food stamps and if you have an EBT card, just for anyone who isn't sort of familiar with the process, is you get a balance at the beginning of the month. And in order to find out what you have, so say you go shopping, you swipe it, you use it, you maybe buy $35 worth of groceries. You don't know exactly how much you have left unless you call a phone number, and you have to put in something like 18 or 20 digit code, and then they'll tell you how much you have left. And you have to sort of remember that. And then you do your shopping, and then and again, you try to remember. And I don't know about you guys, but like budgeting is hard enough. When you also have to keep these numbers in your head, it's really, really difficult. And so all this does really is tell you your balance on your app, so you can do your planning properly, physically in place. It also connects people with different grocery stores that are in the area. It tells you about deals that are going on, and it started to also have recipes from Good and Cheap on here, because I've been working with these guys. But the thing is that the government in general makes it a little bit more difficult on purpose, because they don't want people to be encouraged to stay on it, as if anyone would anyway, if they had the choice. But this just makes it a little bit easier, and I'm really excited about this, really proud of this, because as long as I've been doing this, someone has said, we should do this, and all these people have attempted this. About the 10th company that has tried to do this, and they've actually succeeded. And I believe they have 220,000 downloads. They had that in the first month. It's really, really popular. The simplest thing, it really helps people out. So, okay. I want to just briefly talk a little bit more about the philosophy. We've talked sort of about the positioning, kind of why I called it good and cheap, the importance of photographs and the beauty of it. We've talked about pleasure a little bit. The importance of celebration and joy is another thing, and inspiration. But one thing that you might think is kind of missing is really where does health fit in? You haven't really talked about that. It's implicit. There's a lot of fruits and vegetables in the book. That's really sort of the core of where my recipes come from, but it's not something I really harp on particularly. And that's for one really simple reason. It's that I don't think that healthy food has sort of the best. We need to work a lot harder on making healthy food, on explaining what healthy food means. Because right now, this is really what healthy food means to most people. You walk into a grocery store, and the healthy stuff has all these labels on it that say, it's gluten-free, it's got no dairy, this one doesn't have sugar, this one has no GMOs. It has all these sorts of things. It's all about what's not in it. And I don't know about you guys, but I've never reached for something because it doesn't have something in it. I only reach for things that do have something in it, that have something to offer me. And that's what we need to talk more about when we talk about healthy food. We need to celebrate deliciousness, because the thing is sort of, and I'm simplifying a little bit, but the bad guys, for lack of a better term, that's all they celebrate is deliciousness, and that works perfectly. This is a Burger King. I know it doesn't look as delicious as it could if we had a little bit, but imagine a juicy burger. The truth is that's all that most food advertisers have is, you want this. There's something visceral about it that we want, right? They don't have any moral argument. They don't have all this complex stuff that we have when we talk about healthy food, which really kind of misses the point. I think we need to celebrate. The truth is people think that healthy food is not for them. It's too expensive, and so why should you even try? And that's something we really need to counter. And we need to celebrate. We need to celebrate how delicious and gorgeous we need to be celebratory about healthy food rather than moralistic and judgy. And it's something we have to be really careful of because it's so subtle. So I would suggest, this is one of my favorite recipes from the book. It's Mexican street corn. You can't quite see it, but basically, it's incredibly simple. All you have to do is shuck your corn, throw it in the oven, under a broiler ideally, but it's fine. You can use just the oven. Get a little bit of brown on there. Take it out, slather it in a small amount of mayonnaise, crumble some cheese on it, a little bit of hot pepper if you roll that way. I roll that way. A squeeze of lime. And so it's salty. It's sweet from the corn, it's tangy, it's spicy, it's extraordinary. It's like the perfect bite. But it's very, very simple to do. And this recipe, I always think of this story of this woman who wrote to me and she said, "Hi, Leanne, I just found out about your cookbook and I'm really excited to try it, but here's my situation. I have been living with a caretaker. I'm physically disabled and I've been living with a caretaker for over 10 years. And I'm moving out on my own for the first time. And, I'm on SNAP, and I'm going to have to be cooking all these meals for myself, and I just don't, I'm have a little bit of trouble with mobility, and I'm really, really nervous about how it's going to go. But your cookbook, the way you write about it, you make it sound so easy, so I'm encouraged. And so I, of course, was extremely concerned about her and made a bunch of suggestions, and she said, okay, I'm going to cook some things, and I'll get back to you. And so she got back to me right away the very next day. I was so delighted. And she had made this recipe, the corn. And she told me that it was so delicious when she first bit into it that she began to just weep. And she said, I was weeping not because it was so delicious. That was wonderful. But I was crying because I realized how much fear I had been holding in, and suddenly I could let that go because I knew everything was going to be okay. If I could make this, I could do this. I could be on my own. I can take care of myself. And she said, and I can't wait to make oatmeal tomorrow morning, which may be the first time anyone's ever said that. It's hard to say. But that's really the power of cooking. It is empowering. It's so empowering. If that's something that you can do for yourself. All right, so I need to wrap this up pretty soon. If this is something you can do for yourself, then you can kind of do anything. last story, and then I will be done, I promise. I want to tell you about Brenda. Brenda is this grandmother. She lives in Texas, very, very small town. So, I was sort of thinking about you guys. Really small town, like 5,000 people. And she, okay, no, that's not so small. All right, I'm embarrassed now, but pretty small town. Right, okay. She lives in a small city in Texas. Dear God. And she's living on her retirement income, and she has her 2 grandchildren who she's the sole care provider for. And, she lives her lives to serve these kids. They are her entire world. And when she first wrote to me, she was really trying to change something and do better for them, because she told me, we're really struggling. We have food stamps, and it helps so much, but at the end of every month, I find we run out of money way before the end of the month, and so we find ourselves at the food pantry. And unfortunately, the food pantry in town, it's great, we're so glad to have it, but it doesn't have very many healthy options. And I know that's something I really want to do. Her girls were 8 and 10, they're at this age where she's like, I want to take care of them so badly, and I don't want to feed them the stuff that's full of sugar. But we have to, and we're thankful for it, and we get by. And so she had started to look, was looking at Good and Cheap. She was looking at all these things online. She was educating herself. She said she was starting a garden. She was doing all these things. It was amazing. And we just got into, we sort of became pen pals, and we would chat back and forth for a really long time. And for a while, we kind of got out of contact. And she wrote to me, this is probably about a year ago now. She wrote to me again out of the blue, and she said, hey, Leanne, what's going on? I think she said Happy Easter or something, and I asked for an update on her life, which of course began with all the accomplishments of the grandchildren, because that's most important. But by the end, she told me what I really wanted to know, and she said, oh, and by the way, we're doing really, really well. We actually haven't had to go to the food pantry in months. We're eating sort of more beans and vegetables and a little less meat, and it's really helped us balance things out. We're loving our food, we're enjoying it. Oh, and by the way, I've lost about 40 pounds, and I'm off my diabetes medication and my heart medication, whatever. Hope you have a good day, bye. And I guess that's the thing. I'm not a dietitian. This is not a diet book. But the reality is, when you eat well, when you eat more fruits and vegetables, when you start to care about what you eat, when you get into it, when you start to cook for yourself, you're naturally just going to reap these benefits. It's just sort of going to happen. And I don't mean to minimize Brenda's effort, actually, because she really did this for herself. Obviously, this was a huge goal, but that's kind of how it works. It's a slow slope. We don't have to leap all the way into it. It's something that we can kind of work our way up to, and it can have really exciting impact. And really, that's all I sort of have to share with you guys today, and there's lots more to unpack, and I hope we'll ask questions and discuss more later, but I should stop. So that's it.
Thank you, Leanne. Think about how the cookbook that we have up at the table could be used. Your organization, your community, what can we do that can make that work and can make it better? So on to transportation. I don't know how many of you saw the recorder this morning. We have now a bus that goes directly from Greenfield to Boston. We haven't had that before. It's a milk train type of bus. It takes a while to get there. It's a beginning. But the idea that those kinds of needs that we have as a region are starting to be responded to is extremely important. And then we've got the job of making it really work. And that's the difference. The difference is, how do we take the resources that we have, which always start out limited, and make them more robust and make them work for us. And that's where the innovation comes in. So I would like to introduce Matt. This is Matt George. Matt is the CEO of Bridge, which is the leader in creating smart cities through smart mass transportation. Now, we're not a city, but we think we can use this idea. Bridge has been recognized in the New York Times, The Economist, and most major American technological publications for its work in creating a smarter city through mobility. Bridge uses big data, which he will explain, and network optimization, which he will explain, to develop direct transit routes within a city to cut times in half without a car. Matt has a degree in biology from Middlebury College and lives in Brookline. Let me just say that Matt has been working in New York, in Boston, in DC, in Boston, in Kansas City, in Johannesburg. The ideas that are here are something that are going to take a little work to work for a rural area, but we think there are possibilities here. So we want you to think about it and see how it might work for you. Matthew.
Thanks. What I don't want to do, guys, is I don't want to just sort of give you the spiel on Bridge. I really don't. I sort of do that every day, and it's Saturday, right? So we'll sort of cut a little bit loose. And I want to push back on something that Susan said, right? That sort of the Franklin County region or a place like Greenfield, or places in sort of greater Western Massachusetts like North Adams or sort of places like that, well, we'll forget about everything that is anywhere close to Williams. I mean, I went to Middlebury, so Williams is sort of the dirty word up there. But I think sort of the way that we define a city really is sort of in the eyes of the beholder, right? And I think sort of the reason that we're all here, the reason that we've all gathered here in sort of light of lots of different places that we could be today, right? With sort of our families, sort of within our communities, is because we do want to make those communities better for our families, right? And when you look, back into sort of Mesopotamia, right, and the Sumerians of sort of the original concept of a city was, not the ends, right? It was a means to be able to support a vibrant, thriving community where folks had access to education, they had access to economic opportunity, they had access to everything that they needed, to be able to really sort of live their lives in a way that was, equitable, just, and sort of allowed for a lot of opportunity. So I want to sort of use that to sort of set the stage for what we're talking about here today. Without sort of going into the election or without sort of talking about that stuff too much, I don't want to underestimate the threat, right, of sort of a new funding environment to some of the core services that make our cities and our small towns really, really vibrant, right? So I think one of the things that we really need to look at moving forward is how do we still maintain our great cities and towns, not just in sort of the big places like Boston or Worcester or Springfield, but all of our cities and towns, sort of no matter the size. So before I get too much sort of into what we're doing and sort of the challenge that we're solving, just sort of a little bit about myself, because I actually think it's important to the conversation. So I grew up pretty poor in Philadelphia. Got to the Northeast for the first time because Middlebury offered a really, really great financial aid package. It looked nice in the brochure, and the first time I stepped foot in the Northeast or the state of Vermont was like unloading my duffel bag and like looking around like, oh, this is pretty nice. Despite sort of the great financial aid and things like that at Middlebury, I still had to work a lot sort of in college. So I actually took time off between high school and college to go to paramedic school in Texas. So I was an EMT in high school, and then went to paramedic school in Texas, because paramedics make 4 times as much as EMTs, and I needed that to be able to sort of stay in school. So in Vermont, and then also back home in Philadelphia, I worked as a paramedic. And the relevant part here is that I ended up leading a couple different organizations in Vermont that provided emergency medical service to towns that are exactly the same size, makeup, right, sort of the folks here in Franklin County. So if anybody's familiar with Vermont geography, or for White River Valley Ambulance and ran that for a while, which covers the huge stretch from White River Junction all the way up to Montpelier, right? It's one ambulance station, right? So when we're talking about like, do we understand rural issues? Do we understand like rural governments, right? Yeah, right. I get it. Right. I think one of the other things that was not just challenging but also really really hard was sort of during that time, a lot of the small towns sort of in that region were facing a real crisis, right, with their town budgets, volunteers, right, and not being able to actually put ambulances on the street. And we were sort of the paid professional large ambulance organization. We had to have the really difficult sort of conversations and integrations of having smaller towns sort of evolve, right? And I don't mean that in sort of either a positive or a negative way, but just evolve based on necessity to sort of the realities that they lived in, right? And how do we work with what we've got, not be dogmatic about it, and make sure that we're providing the best possible service to the folks who rely on us. So I want to use that to really transition into what sort of Leanne was saying, and sort of what we do at Bridge. I think sort of the part that I was most struck sort of by Leanne's story was the fact that it was almost sort of an accident, right? Sort of she had a fantastic sort of thought, had a fantastic work, right, and sort of put it out there, and she did something, right? She tried it. She got out there. She didn't just think about it, right? Put it out in Kickstarter, and the whole world listened. She's changed hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of lives. So when we're talking about what is important here for places like Franklin County, right, or places in sort of the greater Greenfield area, it really is sort of that attitude of trying something, right? Here's the cards that were dealt, right? Here are the really smart people that we have in the room who are spending their Saturday trying to think about things in a way that's a little bit different, a little bit more progressive. And let's get out there and try it. So what I want to do is I want to share, sort of the story of how we tried it, right? What we're doing, but also sort of set that in the context of some of the greater issues around mobility. So just by show of hands, who walks to work? And if you're retired or recently retired, did you walk to work? Okay. Who here is walkable to a grocery store? I'm shocked. How many of those people live in Greenfield? Okay, there we go. All right. But the point that I'm making here is the fact that Bridge is a mobility company, right? To sort of set the stage, we're about a $250 million company, which is just like mind-blowing to me. I don't even know how it happened. I'm sort of lucky enough to lead a group of about 125 folks who sort of work with me out of our Boston office, and we also have an office in Kansas City, Missouri, as well as an office now in Mexico City. So have really sort of pushed out. And the reason that we come to work every day, right, especially when there's so many other cool projects that everyone could be working on at Google or Facebook or wherever, is really because of that mobility and making sure that sort of folks have access to their communities. So when you take the average American in the average American city, they can only access about 30%, guys, of the jobs that they're qualified for via 90 minutes on public transportation. 30%, right? You take the average person in Holland, they can access 92% of the job they're qualified for via 90 minutes on public transportation. And that's in a city, right? A city that's been defined as over 150,000 people, right? So the point I'm making is that when we're talking about transportation, we're talking about mobility, we are not talking, guys, we're not talking about the act of putting a bus on the road, a car on the road, a bike share, on the road. What we're talking about, those are tools, right? The goal is to be able to get folks to economic opportunity in the form of jobs, to get folks to be able to access their communities, right? And to be able to access sort of the key essentials that everyone needs to be able to live their lives and really thrive in their communities in a way that's sustainable and doesn't put an undue economic or environmental burden, right? So what I want to do is I want to sort of zoom out and say what we're not talking about any one particular mode, right? We're talking about how can we actually be able to provide services, right, to communities that enable folks to get around, to live in those communities, and to do that successfully. So what we do at Bridge in that sort of goal is create a network and an infrastructure for folks to be able to move around. So at Bridge, what we do is we look at billions and billions and billions of data points to be able to understand how both people and things are moving around cities. And when I say cities, right, like we're partnering with the Vermont Department of Transportation, using a federal grant, right, in sort of rural areas as well. So I use cities in like, for all the way from the 300-person village to the, 28 million people in Mexico City. So what we do is we look at billions and billions of data points, in sort of a city to be able to understand where people and things are. So we're looking at where cell phones are hitting towers. We're looking at where people are swiping credit cards, all anonymized, right? But getting a real-time view of how people are moving around cities. We then take all of that data, put it into a computer system, which creates trillions of possibilities and scenarios that predict how a city or town is going to move on any one given day. We take all those predictions and load it into a mobile application, right, that creates a pop-up bus network or a logistics network that enables folks to move around. So let me just sort of zoom out and sort of define pop-up, right? So when we're talking about pop-up, what we mean is that, there might be a bus stop there one day, and there might not be a bus stop there the next day, right, sort of depending on demand. However, we know that if you're living in a certain area, we're always going to promise you that a bus stop will always be within a 5 to 7 minute walk of where you are, and a bus stop will always be within a 5 to 7 minute walk of where you need to go. The location just might change depending on where your neighbors are going and sort of where the vehicles are. And that brings up a lot of important questions, right, especially around equity and accessibility. Especially when we're talking about anything that's technology enabled. What about the folks who don't have a smartphone? Or cell phone service. To that point, right? I mean, still to this day in that valley, right, where I was a paramedic, I mean, you called people when you were heading over the mountain to work because literally for 60 miles, give or take, nothing. And that's also another weird story. Almost by design, they like it that way. But no cell phone service, right? But also, how do you actually sort of create a system that leverages the technology for folks who don't have a smartphone, right? How do you leverage technology? How do you leverage new mobility for folks who don't have a credit card? For those who don't use a bank or are unbanked? How do you create a new mobility system for those folks who need a mobility device to be able to get around, right? So what we've done at Bridge is try to create a system by which we can accommodate everyone, right, regardless of their specific need, their mobility need, or sort of the technology tools that they have available to them, and create an infrastructure, right, that allows for a variety of different, mobility modes. So for instance, we'll talk about it in a second, for folks who don't have a smartphone, especially, when we're partnering with the city, and we're partnering with the federal government, we mail them a locked out Android phone, right, that has, the app on it, right, instead of a prepaid data plan. Because if you're talking about building a call center that somebody can call in, right, and sort of, say, oh, well, I'm here, I need to go there, and then, oh, I'll call you back in 10 minutes, right? Like, that's really bad for the user, but also really expensive, right? Where a locked Android smartphone costs about $20, right? So also to Leanne's point, right, of saying the user experience here matters, right? For the same person who's calling into the Snap line, or the WIC line and say, how much money do I have left? That really takes away a lot of dignity from that person, right? And says, because you are poor, or because you don't have a smartphone, or whatever reason, we're going to treat you differently, right, than sort of the rest of the population, rather than trying to think of some pretty creative ways to actually, level the playing field, rather than reducing the playing field and creating two separate stadiums for rich people and poor people, right? Right? But seriously, that's what we've done, right? That is what we've done. We've said, especially with the advent of new technology, because not everyone can access it right now, we've said, whatever, right? You go off into your own little stadium, and we're going to build a brand new one over here. And but you still have a stadium. It's really condescending, right? And I think one of the things that this election has shown is the fact that that's real, right? And people really, really, really feel that. They'll get off my soapbox now. What we've done at Bridge, and by God, we are not perfect, right? Like if you read any op-ed or any sort of the folks who, are pretty vocal, right, in sort of the conversation around us, by God, we're not perfect. But what we try to do is create a system where we can dramatically improve the access of mobility to folks who don't have it, right, or need it using a car, and create one stadium, right, rather than a bunch of little stadiums where, sort of a CEO, and this happens, right, a CEO of a Fortune 15 company, sits every day, they're friends, they met on the same vehicle, right, sits every day next to somebody who's a janitor at his organization, right? It happens, right? So when you're looking at sort of, Bridge as it exists now, I know you can't see it, but essentially how it works is a user wakes up in the morning. By the way, this is all our R&D team, no actors or anything like that. A user comes into the system and says, hi, my name is Matt. I'm at point A, and I need to go to point B. As long as they're within our coverage area, we're promising them that we're going to be able to pick them up within a 5 to 7 minute walk of where they are and drop them off within a 5 to 7 minute walk of where they need to go. We are not promising them a specific pickup location, and we're not promising them a specific drop-off location in advance. So when they go into the system and they say, I'm here, I need to go there, they know that they're going to be able to get the bus, right, within a 5 to 7 minute walk, and they know they're going to get departure time options about every 5 to 10 minutes, right, at one of those locations. So they get the location, they confirm, and then they get walking directions to a location, right, to meet the bus. That location is where we're also directing everyone else in their neighborhood to go to, right, who also needs to go to a similar destination. So we're essentially creating a little swarm of people, right, who are all starting at the same location and are going to the end location. And instead of a phone chain of saying, hey, you want to meet on the corner of, Main Street and Elm Street? Oh, no, I'm over. The computer system is giving them a point. They all get on the bus. The vehicle expresses to a drop-off location where everyone walks the last 5 to 7 minutes themselves. If somebody has a different mobility need, right, or uses a mobility device to be able to get around, what we're able to do is tag them, of course, in the system, and the vehicle will just simply go right to their driveway with sort of folks on it, right? Who have maybe gotten picked up at one of those regular agritourism pickup locations. So one of the things we're really proud of, and by God, we are a long way away from being perfect here, is sort of reducing the gap between paratransit and transit. Because at the end of the day, there shouldn't be paratransit and transit. There should be transit, right? So at the end of the day, that's sort of how the bridge system works, on sort of the macro level. And for the end user, even sort of a city like Boston, they're saving about 60% of their time, compared with their traditional mass transit commute, right? So for people who are transitioning, and by the way, we have a great relationship with the MBTA. We're partnered with the MBTA, right? So it's not a sort of adversarial relationship. We are a public utility in the state of Massachusetts, so fully licensed, regulated, insured, professional drivers, who, by the way, we are the first and only startup to sign on to the Fight for 15 pledge. So all the drivers in the system make at least $15 an hour, many much more, and are on the same health insurance plan that I'm on, right? So by using sort of a system that's a lot more flexible, we can actually meaningfully move the needle overnight in terms of people's access to mobility. Being able to access jobs that they might not have been able to access before, and doing that at a price point that is still significantly more than public transit. I want to make that very clear, right? So our price point is about $4 as opposed to $2.50 on public transit. And while that might not sound like a big difference, compound that twice a day, right? Every day of the week, and that's significant, right? But compared with a car, right? Which, when you include parking and sort of all that, especially in sort of an urban commute like that, it's $21 to $22 each way. And it's significant, right? And we don't receive any subsidy, right? From sort of the government. So that's how sort of the system works. Moving millions and millions and millions of passenger miles at sort of, in sort of places all around the country. But really, hold on, I'm just gonna move it over. But really just sort of is demonstrative of sort of the point Leanne was making of saying, well, just try something, right? By creating a system and by creating sort of a platform that we're implementing quickly, right? And working on in cooperation with our users and creating a structure that we can iterate off of rather than some big master plan, right, that we think about for 20 years and just sort of put out there just in time for it not to be relevant anymore, right? We can actually create a structure that sort of lives and breathes and evolves with sort of our growing and changing towns. So I want to take a pause about talking about Bridge and use another, public benefit corporation as sort of an example of this. I just threw this in here during Leanne's talk, but so there's a company in Chicago that is a public benefit corporation, is sort of an offshoot of the Robert F. Kennedy sort of foundation run by Chris Kennedy, called Topbox Foods. So Topbox delivers huge boxes, right, of staple items, a lot of meat, right, vegetables and other things. So sort of a CSA plus for those folks who are food insecure, right? So about half their population, don't quote me on this, right? Half their population is on sort of WIC, and the other half is just on sort of the borderline, and really, really sort of needs that service. What Topbox does is they partner with local community centers and churches throughout Chicago, Boston, New Orleans, and actually Vermont now as well, to be able to distribute these boxes through, right, sort of local community organizations. So just like Bridge is creating an infrastructure, right, where mobility can evolve with communities, companies like Topbox are creating an infrastructure by which food supply, right, can sort of evolve and change with communities. Topbox is a really cool model. They have targeted and priced it so they never make any money, but they're not reliant on outside subsidy and they're not reliant on outside donors, which is really, really, really important, especially when you're talking about something like food, which you need to be sure is going to be there, right, sort of the next week. But the point I want to make here is that guy is unloading it from a truck, right? So when we talk about mobility systems and when we talk about, sort of how to actually make really, really strong communities, especially, in places like Franklin County, we need to think really holistically about how we're delivering people and goods, right, throughout our region. And by the way, could those things and those vehicles be the same vehicles, right, that are both distributing people and goods? We're really proud of the fact that in Boston and some other markets as well, we're doing limited tests where we're actually distributing urban cargo, right, in the form of like bulk consumer products, concurrently with people, right, using Bridge vehicles, right, sort of throughout the city, and using sort of local neighborhood drop points, right, that are within a block or two of somebody's house. So when we're talking about mobility and when we're talking about sort of things that we can do here, really what it comes down to is saying, well, let's actually go back to sort of the first principles and understand where are people, where do they need to go, where are things, where do those things need to go, and can we create a system to move those people and things in a way that's efficient? Like, it's not rocket science here, guys. Like, it really isn't, right? And when we're talking about sort of the different tools in our belt to be able to do that, sure, there might be cars, right? Sure, there might be sort of public transit. Sure, there might be, things like Zipcar. But it really needs to be an integrated effort of all those modes to move people and goods sort of around our region. And what I want to leave with, and the last example I want to leave with, is our work with Kansas City, which we've sort of replicated, now sort of throughout the country and throughout the world. So we can do Bridge in a market like Boston, right, where there's sort of a lot of density and sort of a lot of folks that we can just sort of go out into the market, price it at a market rate, and make money, right? That's surprise, right? Like we're making money, right? Even though we're delivering at sort of a low price point. In a place like Kansas City, despite it being a massive city, the density simply is not there, right? For us to be able to go out and sort of launch the product directly to the consumer. So in sort of secondary and tertiary markets like Kansas City, especially when density is lower, what we've shown is that we're actually able to work not just sort of with government permission and in partnership with governments, but actually as a direct extension of transit agencies and governments to be able to provide innovative mobility in a way that reduces cost and sort of improves service. So this is a Bridge vehicle, right? Looks identical to sort of the ones in Boston. However, that vehicle is owned by the Kansas City Area Transit Authority, right? Bought to our specification and branded Bridge. Ride KC is their transit agency brand. In the driver's seat of that vehicle is an Amalgamated Transit Union driver who's an employee of the Kansas City Area Transit Authority. And the Kansas City Area Transit Authority partners with us to replace large swaths of inefficient fixed route bus service that's really bad for the customer, but also costs them a lot of money, right, that diverts from other core projects that they need. And they partner with us to be able to deliver better service at, sort of a price point for them that's about 70% less than what they were paying for that same area with sort of fixed route service. They've used that money, right, to sort of, move to other places and sort of other projects. in a way that we think is really, really fantastic. But my point here is the fact that this is not, we're not faced with sort of a choice here. We're not faced with sort of an Ayn Randian, sort of free-for-all of saying, privatize everything, right? And let sort of the private sector take over key public service. I think that's a terrible idea, right? But also, I think we need to reevaluate the concept of saying, do we continue sort of the model that we've always done, right, over the past 120 years of delivering this logistics for both people and things in the same way that we've always done that, especially with very different funding environments, and especially with rapidly changing demographics, and our cities and towns are changing as well. So this is really what I'm most proud of, right, in Kansas City. We can have all the other fancy stuff, all over the world, but being able to partner directly with sort of a transit agency, use core federal dollars, and keep a system in public control while still driving sort of the benefit and efficiency of the private sector, that's really cool, right? It's still very far from perfect, but that's really, really, really cool, and allows the public sector to not just be the provisioner and the provider, but to just be the provisioner and to choose the best provider, right? To sort of execute on the mission of moving people around the city in a way that's the best for their bottom line, right? And the way that's the best for sort of the customer. So what I want to leave with is sort of the thought that, and sort of the imperative that is really sort of on us, right? Or on you, right? Like, this is like a pretty self-selecting group in here, right? Like it's on you. Of all the people who are sort of in Franklin County and sort of the greater Greenfield area, it's on you guys, because you guys are the guys that, sort of showed up here and sort of took time away from everything else that you're doing to be here. One of the things I think we've seen over and over again is folks, want something done, but they really don't have a plan to do it, right? They'll write an op-ed or they'll write a nasty Twitter message, but that's about it, right? So I think really when we're moving forward here and as we're sort of, going into the afternoon sessions, be really aware that there's nobody else who's going to come in and swoop in and change things. They're not, right? It's going to be you guys. So if there's one lesson you sort of took away from at least our experience at Bridge, and sort of lesson of good and cheap, really is the fact that we can actually achieve a tremendous amount of progress in very short periods of time and with very, very, very few resources if we commit to stepping out of our comfort zone and standing up for those folks, who are now in their own little stadium, right? And bring everyone into the fold and delivering true mobility to make sure that folks can access their communities, their jobs, and really, be able to live sort of an equitable and just life, right? In small towns and cities across the country. So that's us. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt, for participating.